Hi.
This is your reminder to drive safely. Stay safe.
Yeah, I feel like I said everything. 63%. 63% of people report letting their mind wander while they're driving. 63%. Now that actually doesn't sound like such a crazy figure when you think about the fact that all of us have been in the situation where we're driving and we don't realize we're driving and we're kind of zoned out and we're like, oh wait a minute, I'm driving. And that is a distraction in a way while you're driving, but it's not just a distraction, it's dangerous. Being on the road, zoned out, like lives are at stake on the road.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So you have to be focused while you're driving. And so I know you see the title and the thumbnail of this video and you're like, well, Anu, isn't that the quick answer to your question? Driving can't really be mindful if you can't be zoned out while doing it. And while that may be true, and you might be wanting to click off the video right now, hang on for a second, because if you've seen any of my previous videos, you probably haven't. But if you have, you'll notice there are different types of mindfulness, and different ones work in different situations. So the one we're talking about here in driving, the one that we mentioned about letting your mind wander, that's open monitoring. And yeah, obviously it's not going to help being zoned out while you're driving because you need your attention. But there is another type of mindfulness that would be helpful in this case. So stay tuned to see how you can be mindful while you're driving. So we talked a little bit about open monitoring and why it's not a good idea to let your mind wander while you're driving. So let's talk about the other one, focused attention. And obviously it is what it says on the tin, and even by the name itself, you're like, okay, this is probably a little more relevant. And now to be fair, when I went to do a lot of the researching here, there was less on how you can make driving mindful rather than how being mindful while driving is better for you. And we'll get to that later on as well if you're interested in that. But for now, let's talk about focused attention. And it's kind of like being focused on what you're doing and doing it properly and kind of using all your attention on whatever you're doing. That helps you to be mindful. If you didn't know that, it does. That's why a lot of the things, that's why this kind of series is being made, is because a lot of the things we do, we can focus on them and make them mindful as everyday activities, kind of. And so in the case of driving, you can actually focus on your breathing while you're driving, but also like haptic feedback. And I know that's something we use in like the PlayStation controller area, but haptic feedback in the car is a big thing, and also like audio in the car. Like, of course, you might be listening to music, but you can hear the car's engine a lot more than the person sitting next to you in the car. I feel like when I'm sitting as a passenger in a car, I never hear a sound, but when I'm driving the car, I can hear every little millimeter of the accelerator that I press, and I can hear every single sound going on in the car. And so that's obviously auditory feedback. But haptic feedback of like when you're holding the steering wheel, when the car is moving, when you're moving the car, being aware of all that while it's happening, and most of us do this anyways while we're driving, and that's why driving is mindful. Because, well, we're focused on what we're doing, and we have to be, because we need to be safe on the road. And so, I guess we have this little kind of dilemma here of like, how is driving mindful when one type of mindfulness is awful for driving and the other type is kind of what driving is. So let's get into that slightly later on in here, because I forgot to say something that I needed to say. But basically, doing this sort of focused attention and focusing on what you're doing in the car is good for, I guess, two things actually. And the first one is that you're less distracted because you do less distractible things, like being on your phone. Don't be on your phone while you're driving. And the other one is that you have improved performance while driving, and that's, kind of what the research on the screen in front of you is showing you, hopefully. Now, usually both of the different types of mindfulness, like open monitoring and focused attention, are great for most activities. It's not the case here with driving, and the reason for that is safety. One of them isn't safe at all, and you'd rather be alive than be mindful, So in that sense, the costs outweigh the benefits of, I guess, being mindful. I want you to think about your drive home, for those of you that do drive home, and like how many of you would drive home and then when you get home you're actually quite relaxed because you drove home and you got the ability to calm down on the drive home, even though you might have had a shit day at work, and now it's easy for you to transition from your work life to your home life. And it was funny because someone said it to me a few days ago where they were like, oh yeah, I now have a longer commute to work and obviously back from work, but now that because my commute is longer back home, I feel more relaxed when I get home and I don't feel like I'm jumping around and bouncing off the walls when I get home. And I was just like, is that because you're being mindful? Obviously I didn't say that, but like, that's what was going on in my mind, and it might be part of the reason why I'm making the video here. But I just found it really interesting that, like, yes, obviously getting a longer drive home sounds worse and probably even more annoying because, well, there's probably more of a chance that you'll meet more annoying drivers on your way home. But feeling more relaxed when you get home, why? Why?
Why? Why? Why? Why? Why?
And the only thing I can think of is that you're being more mindful. So, yeah. So there you kind of have it. Obviously, one type of mindfulness is detrimental and the other one is all right. So it's not very mindful, but you can be mindful while driving, and I guess that's the important thing. And obviously I'm not going to end the video just here because that would be kind of a silly video to make. And earlier I was telling you that when I went to research this, there was a lot more research on how being mindful while driving is better than driving to be mindful. And so let's go over that quickly so that I feel like I actually gave you something hopefully a little useful. Okay, so like I said earlier when I was researching all this, we found that being mindful before or while you're driving is better for your driving than driving to be mindful is, I guess. And there's a lot more on it. Now, how does being mindful improve your driving? Well, it improves your performance and how you kind of drive. So basically you drive safer, you drive better. Yeah. And well, how do we do that? And how does being mindful while driving achieve that, I guess? And so let's get into it. The first one is that you're less prone to distractions. And I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't, but I know it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but they did this with a driving simulator, so be cautious of, I guess, the results. But I mean, it's not something too crazy to think of, like you're more focused so you're less distracted. Like, wow, crazy work. How does that happen? But the second one is that you make less faults, mistakes, or violations, or whatever it's called in your area, I guess. And also kind of self-explanatory. When you're more focused and you're more paying attention and you're more, intentional about your driving, you're less likely to make mistakes. Now, these last two kind of ways of making your driving better are actually things I never thought of. And the first one is that it reduces negative emotions and anxiety. And I know some people do have a lot of anxiety around driving, and it can be scary, especially if you're driving on big roads. But it's also especially important for, I guess, like newer drivers or learners or, people who are just scared of driving on roads. And also, it's really important when you're driving in a new area because it can be very anxiety inducing when you're driving somewhere you haven't driven before. So for those instances, it's actually really helpful to know that, oh, I can be a little mindful before I drive, or take a break, take a breathing break, and while I'm driving I can kind of get a benefit of having to be more calm while I'm driving, and I'll actually drive better. And I guess the final one is also less road rage. You won't be as mad if you're mindful. And I think it's important because a lot of us can go drive home from work or wherever we are and we can be in a bad mood, and maybe taking that extra minute to just calm down and be relaxed while driving might make us better off on the roads, because sometimes you go driving in a bad mood and then you find more bad people on the road, and then your mood just gets worse, exponentially worse. And then, instead of being calm and relaxed by the time you get home, you're infuriated. And so that's a good way to kind of, that I didn't think of, that like, oh yeah, being mindful is actually good in that sense because you won't be as mad. if it happens to you very often, maybe this is something you should consider. And I mean, my dad always told me that, like, oh, you should never drive in a bad mood because things always go wrong. And I mean, it's a good tip to have in general to not do anything when you're mad or in a bad mood, because the chances are you're probably going to make things worse in whatever way. I think the importance of, I guess, like all of this is to know that, you know, maybe taking a few seconds to take some deep breaths or go for like a 5-minute walk around your car or something before you drive to be in like a calmer state might actually be helpful when you're driving home, or if you have a long drive like where you need your attention or you want to like maybe drive a little faster to be safer while you're driving. But also, like, sometimes we don't have the time to be like, oh, you know, I need to get home in a certain time, but I don't want to rush myself because I don't want to cause an accident, and then all of a sudden I lose so much time. And it might just be helpful to know that, okay, if I don't have like 5 or 10 minutes beforehand to make myself grounded and relaxed and mindful before I drive, I can try to be mindful while I'm driving by focusing on, I guess, that haptic feedback, that auditory feedback, that, you know, obviously you're paying attention to the road, you're watching, and just being focused on what you're doing. And it is important to not let your mind wander in those cases, but sometimes it happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often, but hopefully you'll be able to snap out of it and be like, okay, I actually need to focus on this, and I can still be mindful while I'm focused on this. And hopefully then you'll get home relaxed at the right time, even when you're in a rush. So there you have it. Hopefully that was helpful for you. If it was, please leave a like on the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and leave a comment down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you hate me? Or not? Thank you.